My wife divorced me by text while I was working an oil rig overseas. I'm leaving you and moving to Palm Springs with my 25-year-old babe. I'm taking all our money with me. I calmly replied, sure, good luck. When she realized what I had done, it was already too late. I'm leaving you and moving to Palm Springs with my 25-year-old babe. I'm taking all our money with me. The text came through at 3 a.m. local time in the Persian Gulf, right after I'd finished a 14-hour shift on the rig. My name is Miles Harrington. I'm 52 years old and have spent the last 27 years working oil platforms across the world. My hands were still greasy when I opened the message from Krista, my wife of 18 years. I stared at my phone screen as another message appeared. A screenshot of our joint account balance showing 2 cents, where $142,000 should have been. She'd added a little kiss emoji like this was cute somehow. I didn't throw my phone, didn't punch a wall, just sat on my bunk in the cramped quarters I shared with 2 other riggers and typed, sure, good luck. Then I turned my phone off and went to take a shower. The guys noticed something was off the next day when I skipped breakfast and went straight to work. Jackson, my second in command, kept glancing over during safety checks, but knew better than to ask. We had 16 workers depending on us to keep this floating metal city safe and operational. Personal problems stayed personal. During lunch break I checked my email. Krista had already filed for divorce and claimed I'd abandoned the marriage by working overseas too much. She'd hired a lawyer named Bradley, who specialized in high-asset divorces. They were requesting spousal support based on my excessive income. She even had the nerve to add that her emotional support partner was now living in our house in Odessa. I closed my laptop and went back to work. Didn't mention it to anyone. That night, I wrote one email, not to Krista, but to my cousin Brendan, an accountant in Houston. Time to activate Protocol Winter, I wrote. That was our code phrase from years back. No explanation needed. 3 minutes later, his response, already on it. Don't respond to anything until you're stateside. I had 2 more weeks on this rotation. 2 more weeks of 12-hour shifts in a 10-degree heat while the life I thought I had dissolved back home. The guys would have understood if I'd asked for emergency leave, but what would that accomplish? Better to finish the job and draw the paycheck. When I turned in that night, the rig supervisor Vincent stopped by my quarters. Everything stable? He wasn't just asking about the drilling operation. Everything's under control, I replied. And it was more than Krista would ever know. I met Krista 19 years ago, at my buddy's fishing supply store in Odessa. She was 31 then, working the register, full of jokes about city folks who thought catching bass was complicated. I was 33, already 10 years into oil work, home between contracts and helping my friend stock inventory. We got married 11 months later, fast, but it made sense at the time. I'd already built a good life, owned my house outright from a lucky investment in a small producer that got bought out, had a steady career path on the international rigs. She said she admired my stability, my focus. I admired her spirit. The way she could talk to anyone. The rotation schedule was always the challenge, 2 months on, 1 month off in those days. But the money was exceptional. I could earn in 6 months what most people in our town made in 3 years. We agreed it was worth it. She'd hold down the home front. I'd build our future. Around year 12, the first cracks appeared. Small things, complaints about missed birthdays, questions about whether I really needed to take the Saudi contract, comments about how her friends' husbands were always around for dinner parties. Looking back, I should have seen it. The year I turned 47, she stopped asking when I'd be home, stopped sending photos of what she was doing. Our video calls got shorter, but I dismissed it as the natural evolution of a long-distance marriage. Comfort replacing excitement, routine replacing uncertainty. Last Christmas I came home to find she'd redecorated our entire house without mentioning it. New furniture, new paint, new everything. When I asked about it, she just said, I needed a change. I didn't ask what kind of change she meant. 2 months ago, I noticed transfers from our joint account to one I didn't recognize. House repairs, she explained. The foundation needed work. I drove by the house before leaving for this rotation. No sign of construction, but there was a black Audi I'd never seen parked in our driveway. 4 weeks ago, she stopped answering my calls altogether. Just texts saying she was busy with a new project. I almost flew home early then. Instead, I convinced myself to trust my wife of 18 years. 3 days ago, our neighbor Harold sent me a photo of a moving truck in front of our house. Thought you should know, was all he wrote. I didn't reply, just waited. Sometimes the best thing a man can do is nothing at all. Sometimes the truth reveals itself. I finished my shift the day after Krista's text, and headed back to my quarters. The satellite phone rang. It was Brendan. "You sitting down?" he asked. "Just tell me." He didn't sugarcoat it. "She's been planning this for at least 14 months. Regular transfers to a separate account under her maiden name. Started small, 2,000 here, 3,000 there. Then bigger amounts over the last 90 days. Total of $214,000 moved, not just the $142,000 from your joint account." The room seemed to tilt sideways for a moment. That was significantly more than what showed in our joint savings. "There's something else," Brendan continued. "She changed your beneficiary designations on the life insurance policy 6 months ago, and she took out a $40,000 home equity line of credit against the house, forged your signature on that one." I sat on the edge of my bunk, suddenly aware of the deep of the rig's generators beneath me. 18 years together. Nearly 2 decades of life shared, and she'd been methodically erasing me from it piece by piece for over a year. "The guy?" I finally asked. "Devon Forrester, 25 like she said, former personal trainer. No significant employment history in the last 3 years. 3 previous relationships with women over 45, each ended within 18 months. I didn't need the pattern spelled out. And miles." Brendan's voice dropped lower. "There are credit card charges for 2 one-way tickets to Palm Springs, dated for next Tuesday. That was 3 days from now. She hadn't just left me. She was disappearing, trying to vanish with everything before I even made it home." I hung up and sat in the darkness of my quarters for a long time. Didn't turn the lights on, just sat there watching memories rearrange themselves in my mind like puzzle pieces falling into a different picture. The late-night phone calls she'd take outside, the sudden interest in fitness 3 years ago, the complaints about money despite our comfortable savings. What hit me hardest wasn't the betrayal. It was the planning, the calculated patient dismantling of our life while smiling to my face, while accepting the money I sent home, while telling me she missed me. Something shifted inside me then. The hurt crystallized into something harder, colder. I walked to my locker and pulled out my laptop. Accessed the email account only Brendan and I knew about. Logged into the holding company we'd established 8 years ago, after I watched a colleague lose everything in a divorce. Winterlight Holdings, my grandmother's maiden name, and the creek running through our property combined. The account balance loaded, $1,600,000. I'd been diverting 70% of my income there for 8 years. Legal, declared on taxes, but separated from our marital assets through the corporate structure Brendan had designed. I sent a single email to my lawyer in Houston. Proceed with Operation Cold Return. Then I closed my laptop and went to the mess hall for coffee. For the first time in days, I felt hungry. I landed in Houston 38 hours after my rotation ended. Brendan met me at the airport, handed me a burner phone and a folder of documents. "She's been calling your regular number non-stop since yesterday," he said as we walked to his car. "The bank froze the account she transferred the money to. Standard procedure for large unusual movements. They're requesting you come in person to verify. She doesn't know I'm back. No one does except me and Thomas." Thomas was my lawyer, but that's not the most interesting development. He pulled out his tablet and showed me a series of text messages. They were between Krista and someone saved as D. I skimmed through them. Plans for their new life. Jokes about me working overseas while they spent my money. Details about the house they'd already put a deposit on in Palm Springs. But one exchange from 2 days ago caught my attention. Krista. Bank froze the money. Need Miles to verify in person. What do we do? D. He's still on the rig for 10 more days. Tell him there's an emergency with your mom. Get him to authorize you to handle it. You're still his wife. Krista. He's not answering my calls. D. Try harder. We need that money before the house closing next week, or we need to look at Plan B. Krista. I'm not comfortable with Plan B. D. It's just insurance money. He works a dangerous job for a reason. People have accidents all the time. I handed the tablet back to Brendan. My hands were steady but cold. These are admissible? I asked. They're from the cloud backup of her phone. She used your Apple account credentials to set up her new phone last year. Never changed the password. Everything syncs to your cloud storage. We drove straight to Thomas's office. He'd already prepared divorce papers, a criminal complaint for the forgery on the home equity loan, and an emergency motion to freeze all assets. There's a complication, Thomas said once we were seated. She's filed a domestic violence claim against you yesterday. Says she left because of ongoing emotional abuse and financial control. Claims she was in fear for her safety. That's absurd, I said. I've been 6,000 miles away for the past 7 weeks. Doesn't matter. It's a tactic to gain sympathy with the judge and justify taking the money. Her lawyer's pushing for an emergency hearing tomorrow to get a restraining order against you and exclusive use of the house. So she wants to ban me from my own property while her boyfriend lives there? Thomas nodded. And there's more. The home equity loan, she already spent it, transferred it to an LLC registered to Devon Forrester 3 days after receiving it. I took a deep breath. Options? We counterfile immediately. Fraud, forgery, alienation of affection, criminal conspiracy based on those text messages. We request an emergency freeze on all her accounts and the LLC. And he slid a document across the desk. We file this. I looked down at the paper. Motion to dismiss domestic violence claim with evidence of perjury. What evidence? Thomas smiled thinly. Your location data from your company security badge shows you've been on that oil platform for 7 continuous weeks. Your passport entry and exit stamps confirm it. And I subpoenaed your phone records showing all calls between you two for the past year. Nothing suggesting arguments or threats. I signed where indicated. One more thing, Thomas said. We need you to appear surprised when she's served. She can't know you're back yet. For now, you're still officially at sea. I nodded. I can do that. As I left Thomas's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Krista to my regular number. Please call me. It's an emergency. I need you. I didn't respond. The trap was set, but not by her. I stayed at Brendan's place that night, sleeping better than I had in weeks. The next morning, I logged into the security camera feed for our house in Odessa, a system I'd installed 3 years ago and maintained remotely. Krista had either forgotten about it or assumed I couldn't access it from overseas. The footage showed a young man lounging by the pool, our pool, drinking from my collection of whiskey and wearing what looked like my old college sweatshirt. He was on my phone with someone laughing, feet up on the outdoor furniture I'd built by hand. While I watched, Krista came into frame. She looked anxious, pacing as she talked. I couldn't hear the audio, but her body language was clear. Things weren't going according to plan. Brendan came in with coffee. You should see this, he said, opening his laptop. He'd spent the night diving deeper into Devon Forrester's background. What he found changed everything. He's done this before, 3 times. Brendan turned the screen toward me. Each time, same pattern. Meets a woman. Usually married, always financially stable. Relationship develops. Woman leaves husband taking whatever money she can. They move away together. Within 18 months, he disappears with whatever's left. The screen showed news articles, court records, social media posts, 3 women across 5 years, all left financially ruined. One still paying off credit card debt Devon had accumulated in her name. There's more, Brendan said quietly. He was briefly a person of interest in the death of his second girlfriend's ex-husband. Suspicious car accident 6 weeks after the divorce filing. Man went off a cliff on a road he'd driven for 20 years. No charges were ever filed. But the implications hung in the air between us. My phone rang, Krista again on my regular number. I let it go to voicemail. You should hear this, Brendan said, playing the message on speaker. Miles, please, I need you to call the bank. Her voice cracked with what sounded like tears. There's been a misunderstanding with our account. I was just moving money to a safer investment like we talked about, but the bank froze everything. I can't access any funds. Please call them and tell them it's okay. I'm really scared. We talked about no such thing. The performance was convincing. I'd have believed her 2 weeks ago. She's desperate, Thomas said when we met him for lunch. The house closing in Palm Springs is in 5 days. They need that money. What's our next move? I asked. The emergency hearing is this afternoon. Judge Winters is presiding. She has 0 tolerance for false domestic violence claims. We have your documented alibi ready. And the bank funds? We've filed to have them returned to you exclusively, but there's something else you should know. Thomas slid a folder across the table. Your neighbor Harold sent these to my office this morning. Inside were photos of furniture being loaded into a moving truck, my furniture, family heirlooms, things that had been in my family for generations. They're clearing out the house, Thomas confirmed, planning to disappear whether they get the bank money or not. I closed the folder and handed it back. Change of plans. Both men looked at me. I want to go home. That's not advisable before, Thomas began. Not to confront them, I clarified. To watch from Harold's place. I want to see this with my own eyes. Brendan and Thomas exchanged looks, and I want to be there when they're served, not hiding behind legal papers. I want Krista to see my face when her world collapses. Thomas nodded slowly. I'll arrange it. As we left the restaurant, a text came through on my burner phone. It was from Harold. They're packing your grandfather's desk now, the one you restored. Thought you'd want to know. Some thefts go beyond money. Some betrayals cut deeper than others. This had just become personal, in an entirely new way. The 6-hour drive to Odessa gave me time to think. Thomas arranged for the sheriff to serve papers at 9 a.m. the next morning. Brendan set up surveillance from Harold's house across the street where I'd stay overnight. Everything was in place. Harold greeted me with a silent handshake when I arrived just after midnight. He was a retired petroleum engineer who'd worked rigs himself for 30 years. No explanations needed. "She has no idea you're watching?" I asked once we were inside. "None. They've been busy packing all day, loading the good stuff, leaving the rest." He pointed to his front window, which had a clear view of my driveway. 2 moving trucks came and went. "Big one's coming tomorrow morning for the last load." I nodded, processing the information. "Anyone else been by?" "Some woman with a clipboard yesterday looked like a real estate agent." That was unexpected. "They're selling the house?" "Listing, it looks like. Saw her taking pictures." I called Thomas, who promised to check property records first thing in the morning. At 3 a.m., unable to sleep, I sat at Harold's kitchen table reviewing the documentation Brendan had prepared. Bank records showing Krista's systematic draining of our accounts, phone records revealing hours of calls to Devon going back over a year, credit card statements showing hotel charges in our own town on days she claimed to be visiting her sister. There was a cold clarity in seeing the evidence laid out. Not just a momentary betrayal, but a calculated extraction. A deliberate dismantling of everything we'd built piece by piece. By sunrise, Thomas had texted confirmation. Krista had listed our house with a real estate agency 2 days earlier. Asking price was 30% below market value, priced for a quick sale. She'd forged my signature on the listing agreement. At 8:30 a.m., I watched from Harold's kitchen window as Krista and Devon loaded the last items into Devon's black Audi. Small valuables, easy to transport. My grandmother's silver picture frames, the antique watch my father had given me before he died. At 8:45 a.m., a large moving truck pulled up. 3 men got out and approached the house right on schedule. At 8:55 a.m., an unmarked car parked directly behind the moving truck, blocking it in. 2 sheriff's deputies and a woman in a business suit emerged. Thomas had sent a court officer along with them. "It's time," I said to Harold. I walked across the street as the deputies approached my front door. Krista answered, her expression shifting from irritation to confusion as the officers identified themselves. "Mrs. Harrington, we have paperwork to serve you and the gentleman on the premises." I stayed just out of sight, watching from the edge of the driveway as the color drained from her face. She called for Devon, who appeared behind her, his arms sliding possessively around her waist. That's when I stepped into view. The look on Krista's face was one I'll never forget. Shock giving way to fear, then calculation. Devon just looked confused. "Miles," she whispered. "You're supposed to be on the rig." "Surprise," I said quietly, nodding to the deputies to proceed. They handed over the stack of documents, emergency restraining order against them, freezing of all assets, criminal complaint for forgery, nullification of the home listing, and notice of divorce proceeding citing fraud and criminal conspiracy. "You can't do this," Devon spoke up, puffing out his chest. "She's afraid of you." "We have a domestic violence claim. Dismissed this morning by Judge Winters," I interrupted. "Hard to abuse someone from 6,000 miles away. The judge was particularly interested in the text messages discussing your Plan B involving my insurance policy." His face went slack. Krista stepped forward, tears already forming. "Miles, this is all a misunderstanding. I was just saving our documents," I finished for her, gesturing to the moving truck, "protecting our assets by emptying our house, planning our future by selling our home without telling me." She had no answer for that. "You have 30 minutes to remove personal items only," the court officer stated. "Clothing and toiletries, everything else stays pending court inventory." As they went inside under supervision, I turned to walk away. "Where are you going?" Krista called after me. I didn't look back. Home. The hearing took place 3 weeks later. I sat at one table with Thomas, Krista and her lawyer at another. Devon was conspicuously absent. He'd disappeared 2 days after being served, taking Krista's remaining cash and jewelry with him. A familiar pattern, just as Brendan had discovered. The judge reviewed the evidence methodically: bank records, forged documents, text messages, location data. When she reached the messages discussing Plan B and insurance money, she stopped reading and looked directly at Krista. "Mrs. Harrington, are you aware of the penalties for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, or worse?" Krista's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. "It wasn't like that, Your Honor," Krista stammered. "Devin was just joking. I never would have saved it for the criminal proceedings," the judge interrupted. "This court's jurisdiction is the division of assets and dissolution of marriage." She continued reading through the documents, occasionally shaking her head. When she finished, she set the papers down and removed her glasses. "In my 30 years on the bench, I've rarely seen such a clear case of premeditated financial deception in a marriage." She looked at Krista. "You systematically drained joint accounts while forging documents and planning to flee the state with marital assets." Turning to me, her expression softened slightly. "Mr. Harrington, while your creation of separate accounts through a holding company might seem questionable to some, the court finds that you consistently paid household expenses, filed proper taxes, and made no attempt to hide assets from the government, only to protect them from potential future claims." Her ruling was swift and final. All assets transferred by Krista would be returned to me. The house remained solely my property. Krista's claims for spousal support were denied, and most satisfyingly, she referred the forgery and conspiracy evidence to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. As we left the courtroom, Krista tried to approach me. I just kept walking. Some victories need no words. 6 months later, I stood on the porch of my cabin in the mountains outside Missoula, Montana. The property had been part of Winterlight Holdings all along. 40 acres of pine forest and meadow I'd bought 5 years earlier as a retirement plan. Krista never knew it existed. The forgery charges against her had been reduced in a plea deal. No jail time, but 5 years probation and restitution payments she'd likely never complete. Last I heard, she was living with her sister in Tulsa, working retail. Devin had moved on to a divorce doctor in Arizona, his pattern continuing unbroken. I'd taken early retirement from the oil company. 27 years was enough. Between my investments, savings, and the small natural gas royalties from a property in Arkansas, I had more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Harold called occasionally with updates from Odessa. I'd sold the house there. Too many memories. None of them good anymore. He'd helped clear out the last of my things, shipping the family heirlooms to Montana and donating the rest. The afternoon mail brought an envelope from Brendan. Final paperwork, showing the dissolution of Winterlight Holdings. Its purpose was complete. Assets transferred, taxes paid, a chapter closed. As the sun set behind the mountains, I poured a glass of bourbon, and sat on the porch swing I'd built that summer. For the first time in years, no one was expecting anything from me. No crew waiting for instructions. No wife pretending to miss me. Just quiet and the sound of wind in the pines. My phone rang. A new project manager at a Canadian oil company, offering a consulting position. Tonight was just for me, for the peace I'd earned, for the life I was finally living on my own terms.